Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys here with Koki Riley, one of our young LSU beat writers, and Scott Rabalais, who has been covering LSU since 1946. Gentlemen, welcome in.
We are here. Entire post-war era.
We are going to discuss, obviously, the LSU football program filling out its coaching staff. We're going to discuss a little bit about Kayshon Boutte and the trouble he got himself into. We will discuss LSU baseball getting underway too, as well. But we will obviously begin where everybody would think we would begin, which is LSU women's basketball and the was Thursday's game against South Carolina. LSU loses, of course, 76-70, but that does not even begin to cover what all we saw and what all we experienced on Thursday in the PMAC between two top 10 teams and the previous two national champions getting it on in what was quite a show. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing this morning?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We are you're Natalie clad there, Rab. I appreciate you rolling in here like 007.
I'm doing a little TV stuff. Got a press conference later with gymnastics. Just trying to represent the Advocates.
A man of many words.
If I had a pipe, I would be like all masterpiece theater mode here. But I don't.
Oh, and that would be fitting too for a gentleman, worldly gentleman such as yourself. A little bit of business here, as always. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please find us there. You can find us live. If you don't find us live, you can find us there after the fact. So please subscribe to that LSU Tigers on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Please subscribe to The Advocate, of course. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at The Advocate. So whether that's print or digital, please join the party. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And of course, get a hold of our LSU newsletter. That's a daily newsletter, but Rab handles that 3 times a week by himself personally. You can stay up to date with all the happenings with LSU, whether that's a gambling scandal, whether that's LSU football spring practice, women's basketball, men's basketball, baseball coming up, gymnastics, all of that stuff is all in one place. It's in our LSU newsletter. To sign up, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. As I said, we're here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, but we're also here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever other finer podcasts are found. We are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL, financial member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. But to learn more, go to Champion Wealth Strategies. Contact Champion Wealth Strategies at championwealthstrategies.com. and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, we will get to certainly plenty to do with LSU football and LSU baseball. But really, the main happening, the main event concerning LSU within the past 7 days, there's not a second place. There's only one place to go, and that is the happening, the event that was LSU versus South Carolina, number 1 versus number 10 at the time. The last 2 national champions in women's basketball. South Carolina comes out with a 76-70 victory. And Rab, I'll just get your thoughts. First and foremost, we're going to get to the atmosphere because I think really sort of in the long term, zooming out on everything, I think the atmosphere was really the story of the day, frankly. But let's get the first things first. South Carolina outscores LSU 24-14 in the fourth quarter. This was a game that LSU could have had, and maybe was sort of running uphill in a race that South Carolina was running on a flat course, if that makes any sense. But one way or the other, this was certainly indicative of 2 teams that were not very far apart. Right? Anything you want to sort of open up with?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it was very similar to the game here 2 years ago. In both those games, LSU had an 11-point first half lead and they ended up losing by 6. And that South Carolina
In Kim
team,
Mulkey's first year.
Kim Mulkey's first year, and that South Carolina team went on to win the national championship. Of course, LSU won in 2023, but LSU had a good plan. They're hitting the outside shots. They're getting the inside shots, but you knew they had to stay out of foul trouble. And eventually, what started to creep up was Angel Reese's foul situation. And after she picked up her fourth foul in the fourth quarter, and then she fouled out with 4 minutes left, that was really the blow that just did LSU in. But after she picked up her fourth foul, LSU got one offensive rebound the rest of the game. And South Carolina got a little more. And as you said, they had that 10-point edge in the fourth quarter. But I'm reminded of something Skip Bertman used to say when you'd cover him. He'd be like, someone made the mistake of asking him, "Coach, what was the turning point in the game?" He said, "A turning point in a baseball game. It's a baseball game. What happens in the second inning is just as important to happen in the ninth inning." And in this game, that was kind of true because South Carolina hit a big three-pointer at the end of the first quarter, at the end of the first half. And, especially the one at the end of the first half, and I don't want to pick on anybody because I thought LSU played overall well, but LSU is holding for the last shot. The shot clock is off, and Haley Van Lith takes a shot, a jumper that she missed with about 7 seconds left. South Carolina comes down, hits a three, and it cuts their halftime lead to, they were up 5, and then they were 4 at halftime, I think. No, 5 at halftime. And, those things add up. Those things add up.
Had it been an 8-point, because LSU, just as you say, LSU was really in control. And I don't want to say dominated the first half because that's not true.
No, but they
were definitely in control in the first half.
Yeah.
And yes, at the end of the first quarter, South Carolina gets a basket. At the end of the second quarter, South Carolina gets a basket. And come to find out, those were 5-6 points that came. That certainly made a difference once you got toward the end of the game.
If I'm remembering correctly, I think they had like an 11-point lead with roughly a minute left in that first half. And then, South Carolina goes on a quick 6-0 run.
Yes.
LSU can't, put together a basket to sort of, chop up the run a little bit. And all of a sudden you only have like a 5-point lead at halftime. And like that stuff, as you mentioned, Rab, that stuff really mattered and was huge in the game because they were the better team through 3 quarters. I thought they were winning the battle on the glass quite almost kind of surprisingly, to be honest with you. The Angel Reese played one of her best games of the season. It was just a matter of, just keeping that up into the fourth quarter. And I think a lot of that had to do with fatigue. Some of that had to do with Reese being out. And some of that had to do with South Carolina just playing better and hitting shots at the end. Like they made shots at the end and LSU didn't. And I mean, when you bring in so many big names from the transfer portal, you figure that you're going to have shot creation, even if you don't have someone like Angel Reese in the game over the last few minutes there. But, South Carolina made shots at the end and LSU didn't. And I hate to make it sound that simple, but in some ways it was that simple.
Well, Bree Hall certainly, 2 huge three-pointers, open three-pointers toward the end of the game. And Rab, you mentioned Angel Reese fouling out with 4:02 to go. I honestly didn't think that was necessarily the end of the run for LSU because, the one thing you've said it before, actually, LSU's starting 5 is as good as any starting 5 in the nation. And there's nothing to stop Haley Van Lith, Anissa Morrow, Michaela Williams from knocking down a big shot, whether that was, whether it was contested or not, whether it was difficult or not. And actually Haley did hit a 3 there, to get him to 70 to cut the lead. But, certainly it was difficult from the standpoint of, you mentioned, Rav, certainly in one of these podcasts before that game, that LSU's starting 5 is certainly as good as South Carolina's starting 5, maybe even a little bit better. But the bench is, South Carolina has more dependable players right now coming off the bench than does LSU. South Carolina really brought 5 players off really 4 players off the bench.
Yeah, this game.
But 5 total, but 4 who played a significant number of minutes. I guess the question that I would bring up is, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but we suspect that LSU and South Carolina will meet somewhere down the line again this season, whether it's just in the SEC tournament, whether it's the NCAA tournament. The question is, can LSU continue to develop its bench in such a way that maybe you get a good, strong 6-8 minutes out of. I don't mean to pick on one person or another, but maybe you get a good strong 6-8 minutes out of a Janae Kent or whoever it is. If I'm not mistaken, South Carolina's bench outscored LSU 14-6. So that's an 8-point difference. That's a big difference. And so, I guess really generally speaking, what was, did you suspect that it was quote unquote over when Angel fouled out with 4 minutes to go? And then going forward, is there something that LSU can do to sort of beef up that bench? Because they've obviously had 2 departures or two players who now cannot contribute, and that's affecting what all they can do.
Well, first of all, when Nisa Moro or Angel Reese goes to the bench, they have to bring in Aaliyah Del Rosario, who's a freshman who's a very talented player, was a 5-star recruit. She's 6'5".
Who played a good game considering
played
where
well.
she is.
She had 7 rebounds, 3 blocks, only 1 basket. But when Reese went out, that's who they had to go to. They really don't have anyone else. And in South Carolina, trained its batteries on her, throwing it inside to Cardozo, and she's only going to do so well against a senior, a talented senior like that. So, I thought they were in big trouble when Reese went out, and that was a foul. You can't foul out. You can't let yourself foul out in that situation. And I think Angel Reese, for as great a player as she is, sometimes she's a little impulsive.
Well, but it's an aggressive player trying to make a play.
But you don't make that play. You got to keep yourself in the game. You got to keep yourself in the game. You kick the field goal too, Dan Campbell, down 3 late in the game to tie it. You don't go for 2 if you don't go for on 4th down there. But anyway, there's some bright spots. But you bring up a great point. And for people who have not followed LSU basketball, this point, Samaya Smith was injured back in December, blew out her knee, lost for the season. She was a starting forward at the time. She played great against South Carolina last year.
Sure did.
She was the one bright spot in that game when they lost by 24. And then they really don't have a lot of the post players. You're right. They bring last year Poa off the bench to play point guard, and sometimes Haley Van Lith comes out. Sometimes she moves over to shooting guard, which is her more natural position.
Kateri Poole is not available anymore.
Kateri Poole is also gone. Yeah, they kicked her off the team. She's been dismissed from the team, so she's gone, and she could give them a spark with a 3 and with some defensive effort and stuff like that.
A little ball handling too.
So that was something. So Kent is the player that you most focus on as another talented recruit, a top 100, maybe even top 60 recruit last year, and she can be a ball handler, and she can be someone who can maybe give them a little spark. They need to have that by the end of the season. She did not play in this game. They only brought the 2 players off the bench, Poa and Del Rosario. So that needs to improve for LSU, and there's still time. There's still time for that to improve before March. But LSU has to have everything go right. Yeah, you're right. They could play with South Carolina. Everything had to go right, and it didn't quite. And a couple of big shots they gave up at the end of the periods, and then a couple of fouls, and that's what happened.
I would ask you, Rab, certainly you, since you've been covering LSU since 1931.
It's getting worse.
I know.
Yes.
It's fine. I think I have 2 sometimes.
College game day was here. Students were lined up all the way down the ramp.
They were turning them away
hours before tip, hours before they would let them in the arena. They got turned away at some point. It was just as you say in your column that you had after the game at theadvocate.com, that it was a happening. That this was an entertainment extravaganza every bit as much as it was a basketball game. I would just ask you about the atmosphere. Where did that? First of all, where does that rank among women's games? I know where you stand on that actually, but where does it rank among women's games in terms of atmosphere and the bigness of the game? And where does it rank in terms of atmosphere and the PMAC since you've been covering LSU?
Boy, it's way up there in terms of the women's games. The only other one that compares was Simone Augustus' freshman year, 2003, when it's the same thing. The place was packed and people were standing in the
against Tennessee.
Yeah, against Tennessee in the walkway around the the middle of the arena, And the thing I would say was different about this as compared to that was that that was the first time, and that's always exciting. The first time they filled up the PMAC for a game. But as I recall, there was a big walk-up crowd that day, and I think they let a lot of people in for free who just wanted to come in, or they charged them a couple of bucks.
Yep.
This was people paying, like, I've got to see this game.
Yes.
So they're paying. I know someone in local media. She got us tickets for her mom and husband. She paid like $1,400, for
amazing
for a pair of tickets, behind the LSU bench in that 100 level section. And my wife is a season ticket holder. She has 2 tickets. She thought for a minute about selling her tickets, but she decided to go, and she was glad that she went. But yeah, it was great. Yeah, they had this. It was a whiteout game. Yeah, they had shirts draped on every seat, and they got the kind of a party thing. It was very much like the game in South Carolina last year when LSU played there on Super Bowl Sunday. It was very much the postseason type atmosphere. Like, this could have been a regional final. This could have been a Final Four game. So right up there. In terms of like everything at PMAC, I go back a long way, as we've well established. And when I was a student, LSU had the LSU men hosted the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament in 1986. The last year, the men were allowed to play on their home court in the tournament. And LSU beat Purdue in triple overtime, and they beat Memphis State on the last second shot. And those were tremendous. Those were it's obviously the whole season, and LSU went on to the Final Four in Dallas that year. Made that Cinderella run, and so this was up there with all those things. But as far as in terms of regular season, and LSU's had a lot of great postseason games too for the women as well at the PMAC over the years. But this is for a regular season game. This is right up there with. When Loyola Marymount came, with the men's game,
Sure.
and there was the game
89 or 88 or 89.
It was Hank Gathers, before he died. It was, he was in that game, and I've seen LSU play, some great games there against Kentucky and stuff like that. It was right up there for a regular season game. It was hard to top. And what makes it so great is you just think about before Kim Mulkey came, as I wrote in my column, people were paying hundreds and thousands of dollars to get in the game. You couldn't have given someone hundreds and thousands of dollars to come to the game and fill up the arena.
They were all but begging for people to show up.
A few years ago. I mean, the game 2 years ago against South Carolina, LSU's just getting started, right? And people are excited about Kim Mulkey coming to LSU and all that, but it was not full. It was probably about half. It was a good crowd. It was a very good crowd, but it was about half full. And this was just literally packed. And it was just... it was amazing to see people turn out, and it was loud, and like Koki was there too, and it was just he was watching, and I'm covering, but I mean you're in the middle of it, and it's just like we get to stand back because we're not cheering for or anything, and you just take it all in. It's like, wow, this is one of the, in American sports on this Thursday night, this is maybe the place to be.
It was the place to be. I mean, you look at the ratings, had the highest TV rating from that night among all the different sports, and there were a couple decent-sized NBA games going on. And I honestly not surprised, just given the stature of both these teams. And I guess for me, I've only been here for 1 or 2 years, but that was easily the best PMAC environment I've seen.
The crowd seemed to be into it too, in terms of knowing. And they're not just there just because it's a party, and we're there, because this is a party, and we're just going to sort of party down and, make a lot of noise for the sake of making a lot of noise. They knew what was going on, and they were into it, and they were as much as a crowd, I think, man, I might be overstating this a little bit, but as much as a crowd can try to carry a team all the way over the goal line, that's what it felt like that crowd at the PMAC was trying to do to help LSU, to help that team go over the goal line.
Yeah, just to add like a slight personal touch to this, like I'm from the Boston area, so I'm used to going to Boston sporting events and seeing all these crazy rabid crowds, and there's not a lot of similarities between LSU and Boston sports, but one of them is, at least for me, is just the intensity of the fans. Like there's a difference between being in a place where it's loud and people are excited to be there and it's a big game, and there's a difference between that and the Boston LSU Alabama sort of intensity that comes along with it. Like it's life or death, and and the tens of thousands of people here are treating it like it's life or death, and there's just a different feeling in the air you get when you're in those sorts of places. And there's not a ton of places in the country that sort of have that intensity. And you could definitely feel in that LSU Alabama game, like that felt like Red Sox Yankees to me in a snap, you know? And from 2 years ago when LSU ended up winning that one. So I think that, I just think that the environments here are really special and really unique when it comes to comparing them across, you know, all different kinds of sports and all different kinds of regions of the country.
So what does this mean, Rab, for LSU's women's team moving forward? The reason I bring that up is because obviously they were ranked number 10 going into the game. Is that correct?
No, number 9.
Number 9 going into the game. This is now their third loss, whereas they didn't suffer a loss until the South Carolina game last year.
They only lost
on
2.
Super Bowl. Yeah, that's right. Until Super Bowl Sunday. But we all feel like maybe this team's got more talent. Probably right now, if we were to hazard a guess, they're probably going to get if seedings were to happen right now, they would probably get a number 3 seed. Is that probably fair to say?
Yeah, I would say right now.
But
what they were last year.
Yeah, but by the same token, look, this was a 6-point game that was very much against an undefeated team, incidentally. You know, the consensus unanimous number 1 team in the nation with what is at the moment a short bench. What does this mean for LSU in terms of where it should view itself as a contender moving forward for the rest of the season? Is it fair to say that they're right there?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, like I said, a very, very talented team. That starting 5, any of them can go off for more than 20 points on you. And I think they were all in double
5
figures.
scores in double figures, yeah.
The other night. But at the same time, it's a fragile team in that they can't afford one more injury. They can't afford someone, you know, especially one of the post players like, you know, Reese or Morrow getting in foul trouble. And they both got in a little foul trouble, actually, too. Morrow had to go out for a good stretch of the second quarter, I believe. So it's and the outside shooting can be a little, you know, like outside shooting. You know, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. And Michaela Williams' outside shot was not there the other night. You know, she made a couple of big shots, but then she started driving.
Which
to
me
the
is an
basket.
encouraging thing, because if she's just a little bit more accurate on that night,
And
granted, a lot
she
of things
looked
had to go
tired.
well. Yeah,
Her shots, there just didn't seem to be the quite the same lift. And that's what happens when you're playing so many minutes over so many days, and you're just a freshman. You know, trying to get your sea legs. So,
and maybe that does have something to do with it.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
But that's the tough part in the tournament, and in the NCAA tournament is you got to be on, you know, 6 straight games, and they're likely to stay as a top 4 regional seed, which they would be right now, as you mentioned, and they're likely, you know, that means they'd get to play the first 2 games at home, then you go to a regional, and then you see who you get, you know, and in women's basketball there aren't as many upsets as in the men's tournament,
Right.
although a couple teams got cleared out of LSU's path last year with Indiana losing and then Miami knocking off whoever they beat in the other Sweet 16
South
game.
Carolina losing in the Final Four.
Yeah, and South Carolina losing to Iowa in the Final Four. It was an easier touch for LSU in the final, but it's going to be really hard for them to make it all to win it again. And, you know, is there the talent there? Yes, but it's going to have to go just right, and nothing has gone quite just right for LSU this year with the injuries and the players suspended and the Angel Reese thing and the, you know, it just, you know, obviously you're getting everyone's best shot. Monday, as we're recording this on Monday, LSU's going on Monday night to play at Mississippi State. That's a top 40 team. It's a game LSU should win. They're projected to win. I'm looking at, you know, the projections. Warren Nolan does a great job on his website, and you know, he's got LSU picked to win this game. But it's a game they could lose. But every game, they got 9 SEC games left. And Warren Nolan picks them to win everyone except at Tennessee. But at Tennessee is certainly a game they could win as well. Tennessee went on the road and lost at Ole Miss yesterday, and they're fighting to get in the tournament.
That's right
now. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think, you know, I think somebody's going to have their number in the NCAA tournament at some point this year. But they're not not a team you want to show up in your bracket. You know, if you're the 1 or 2 seed in the regional and they're the 3 or the 4. Like, oh man, not those guys, you know.
So this is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. Please support them. Please subscribe to The Advocate. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Please stay up to date with everything LSU related. Obviously, women's basketball, men's basketball is in full swing. Baseball is about to get into full swing. LSU football, of course, has just finalized their staff, and so they will embark upon spring practice here before long. Gymnastics, softball, everything under the sun. To stay up to date with everything, you get the LSU newsletter straight to your inbox, straight to your phone, straight to your desktop. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please subscribe and stay up to date there. You can catch us live there. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us there after the fact. And if you don't catch us there, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever other finer podcasts are found. And we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. We will wrap up with LSU women's basketball here just to say, Rab, you mentioned that LSU and Mississippi State, Reed Darcy is on his way up to Starkville. God bless him.
Second trip.
God bless him. He's headed up to Starkville. He will take one for the team and go up there. Mississippi State is not a vintage Mississippi State team, 16-5, 3-3 in conference. But you, of course, certainly don't want to take anybody for granted. Rab, I would just put it to you, as we sit here today in late January, and we got a long way to go. But as it is now, as the LSU women's team stands now, where do you expect them to sort of come? Do you expect them to win out and head into the SEC tournament with what would be, 5-2 in conference right now? So that would make them
14-2.
Is that right? 14-2.
There's 9 games left, right?
So do you expect them to win out and secure what would then be maybe a number 3 or number 2 seed, or is there going to be a stumble along the way?
Yeah, I could see them losing a game or two down the stretch. I mean, this is a tough road game. You got to avoid, obviously, making a loss turned into a losing streak. And they bounced back really well after the Auburn loss to win at Alabama, which was a similar team to Miss State, similar record. And they're pointing towards playing you. I saw a picture from LSU's practice there yesterday. They had white T-shirts draped on all the seats too, so they're hoping for a big crowd. And
Kim Mulkey has said that this year. Like, look, you're going to get everybody's best shot.
That's right, and I think they've certainly come to that realization. That the players have. Obviously, she knew that going in, but they also go to Vanderbilt, who's played surprisingly well this year. They're kind of coming back to earth a little bit, but they lost at South Carolina yesterday, and it wasn't really very competitive in the second half. But Shea Ralph, the former UConn All-American, has done a very good job getting them back to health at Vandy. So that's a tough road trip, tougher than it was when LSU went there last year. And so, they're going to get everybody's best shot. So I think I'd be surprised if they didn't drop at least one more game down the stretch. But they're they'll be in pretty good shape overall. For the tournament, as long as they can stay healthy. The postseason is that's when it all matters, and that's when Kim Mulkey's at her best.
And that's when you want to be playing at your best, obviously. So switching gears here, one thing we have not gotten to here on this podcast is the LSU football coaching staff. Brian Kelly has finally finalized his coaching staff. As expected, Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton were promoted to co-offensive coordinator. That's how that worked in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Joe Sloan was in the booth calling plays. Cortez Hankton was co-coordinator, presumably had a large hand to play in developing the game plan and the practice plan for Wisconsin in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Two great coordinators, two highly well-thought-of coaches. They are named co-offensive coordinator. And then Slade Nagle fills out the staff as tight ends coach. This is an interesting thing, I think, just from the simple statement. Slade Nagle, Lake Charles native, who's coming from Tulane. He's bounced around a little bit in the Southeast, but obviously, big Louisiana ties. Joe Sloan, big Louisiana ties, Cortez Hankton, St. Aug grad, and now you've got an LSU football staff that's entirely full of assistant coaches who have some sort of previous Louisiana tie. Was that by happenstance, Koki, do you think, or was that sort of a move that was sort of done on purpose to make sure that you're going to get everything you possibly can out of these guys in terms of recruiting the state and doing as much as you can to draw every player you can out of this state?
We haven't spoken with Brian Kelly since they've made all these
Yes.
coaching moves, really. But I'd be surprised if this wasn't purposeful, at least to some degree, because I mean, Brian Kelly's talked about so many times over the last 2 years about just the importance of recruiting Louisiana, having Louisiana ties, bringing in players who are from Louisiana, and just making it as much of a Louisiana flavor as humanly possible. And I mean, a lot of that has to do with, retention, and it's much easier to keep your players in the NIL era and the transfer portal era when they have that personal connection, they have that personal tie to the university. And there's also just a lot of talent in the state of Louisiana. And and I think getting coaches who understand that and can recruit that and have the connections to do that and execute that plan, to me, it makes sense, at least.
Rab, obviously, the narrative on Brian Kelly is, hey, tremendous on the field coach, tremendous in-game coach, tremendous teacher. We don't know whether he's got what it takes to live up to billing in terms of recruiting the top tier talent. Is this not a move to say, hey, we want to get great teachers and great coaches, but we also want to make sure we're going to do everything we can to get all the players we need to get to compete at the highest level?
Oh, I think definitely so. And when he came here, I'm always of the opinion, and there were questions like, why didn't you keep Corey Raymond then? And now Corey Raymond's back on the staff as coaching defensive
Same
backs.
with Blake Baker.
Yeah, and why didn't you keep Tommy Moffitt as your strength coach? He's now gone to Texas A&M. But every coach has a right to build the staff in a way that makes him comfortable or her comfortable, and get the people and keep the people that you want, and otherwise not. But I think, as Koki said, we haven't spoken to Brian. I'd like to get him under the bright studio lights and kind of
come on the pod, Brian Kelly.
Yeah, and then kind of grill him a little bit, and say, not to say he made mistakes, but maybe he didn't know this area. He didn't know LSU. When he came down here, he spent his whole coaching career in the Midwest, and I think maybe he is seen and he hired Frank Wilson away from McNeese to come on his be a part of his first staff. And everybody's like, that's a good move, but now it's just like everyone seems to have some kind of tie, and I think he's come to the realization this is not like Notre Dame where you recruit nationally. LSU can recruit nationally, but their focus is going to be from East Texas over to the Florida Panhandle. And taking in a lot of Mississippi, a lot of Alabama, a little Georgia, here and there, and you'll get players from other parts of the country. But this is where your bread and butter can be made, and you have to, dominate the state of Louisiana, which it looks like it's going to be another really good recruiting class this year. And the state, and they're off to a great start for the 25 recruiting cycle. I mean, Bryce Underwood. They have the #1 receiver in the country out of Texas, and they got the #1 running back from Louisiana. They just got a commitment from the top.
Yes, Jabari Antoine, the top cornerback in Louisiana, the top
Slade Nagle.
Yeah, yes, the top defensive player, I believe, from Louisiana as well. So, that's a good addition.
It seems like that's bearing fruit, and as we've said, obviously Georgia's still going to be very good, and Alabama, you can't expect them just to become Vanderbilt, with Nick Saban leaving. But I think there's a bit of an opening for LSU to up its game a little bit, and I think we're seeing that. So I think Kelly has maybe come to a recalculation or a realization that he needed more local people on his staff. And one other one, Austin Thomas, coming back for a third stint at LSU in a personnel management role, an off the field role certainly, but he was at Ole Miss. And he's been here twice before, and now he comes back and in that player personnel role that people are familiar with, and that's another that also seems to be a shrewd move. one could take the cynical note and think, and of course, the first 2 years haven't been bad under Brian Kelly. They've won 20 games and won an SEC West title and had a Heisman Trophy winner. The cynical view is like, is Brian Kelly being forced to do this? By like Scott Woodward or someone else, and I don't think you can probably force Brian Kelly to do too much.
I don't think he would have come here under those auspices.
Yeah.
And I think just.
But I wonder if he's under he's been influenced, or it's just some realization he's come to on his own.
I think it's. I mean, we don't know for sure, but I just think he's sort of come to the realization. Hey, wait a minute, I can. I'm oversimplifying this way too much, but he basically, hey, look, I know I'm a great teacher. I know I'm a great scheme kind of guy, but yeah, we need players. It's for first and foremost, it's going to be about 4-star and 5-star players. We can't coach these. We can't coach 3-star players up all the way to the point where they're going to beat 5-star players from Alabama or Florida or wherever else it is. Florida maybe could have picked a better example since they're going through it right now. But no, I think it's the case. He said, yeah, he probably came to the realization, yes, this is going to be as much personnel and talent as it is going to be coaching and scheme. So
when we're talking about the Louisiana ties with the coaching staff, just look at what the coaching staff looked like before they made all these changes. I mean, Jamar Cain was the defensive line coach. He didn't have any Louisiana ties. Matt House, defensive coordinator and linebackers coach, he had no Louisiana ties. Same goes with Robert Steeples at cornerbacks. Same goes with Kerry Cooks at safeties. Now that's all changed. And I think part of the reason is because of the success they had on the offensive side of the ball where they had more Louisiana ties. I mean, obviously, now I'm blanking on the offensive line coaches.
Brad Davis.
Yep. He's from Baton Rouge.
Sure.
And Joe Sloan, has plenty of Louisiana ties. And Cortez Hankton's from New Orleans. And I just kind of, the fact that there was proof of concept of it working on the offensive side of the ball with having Louisiana-based, had to have coaches with Louisiana ties and have that work. Just trying to replicate that on the defensive side of the ball, I think that makes sense. And obviously these guys have to be good coaches as well. And I mean, obviously they have that, especially when you look at the success Blake Baker had at Missouri, Corey Raymond, the success he had here.
Certainly.
Just go down the line. So, it's I don't know. It just makes sense to me.
One last thing before we get out of here, and again, we're switching gears, but obviously, Koki, you're going to be our lead LSU baseball beat writer throughout the season. You guys have both seen and have spoken to Jay Johnson several times now in the past the past week and a half or so. Media day was on Friday. They opened up baseball practice. Anything that stood out to you maybe in the past, 4 or 5 days in terms of things he's revealed, things you've seen in practice, anything of that nature?
Yeah. I thought it was kind of funny as like that, Josh Pearson still doesn't totally have an infielder's glove at the moment. He's
moving to second base.
Yeah, because he's moving from the outfield to second base. And it does make sense a little bit, and it was just a question that sort of popped up in my mind at the last second during Friday's press conference, and he's still working one in, but he's using Stephen Milam, the freshman infielder, using one of his infield gloves instead to work at the position, and you can tell everything is sort of new to him over there at second base, but at the same time, I think second base is kind of probably one of the easier positions to sort of usher an outfielder into an infield position like that. And he had experience playing at that spot in high school. So I was also kind of curious to see, how much experience he had playing that position just flat out in the first place. And with Gage Jump, I mean, he sort of talked about why he transferred from UCLA to LSU in the first place. And one of the reasons was sort of the demise of the Pac-12, like the slow demise of.
Interesting.
He sort of talked about he didn't like the direction of where the conference was going, and it makes sense. And his prophecy ended up becoming true because sadly the Pac-12 no longer exists. So yeah, now he's here at LSU, and like he said, he sort of has something to prove because he's only pitched 16 innings in his collegiate career, even though he was a highly regarded recruit, and Jay Johnson recruited him very hard back when he was at Arizona. So yeah, he's got a lot to prove here at LSU, and it's gonna be really interesting to see how he does and how that that whole rotation shakes out.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brad.
Two things come to mind. One was Michael Braswell, the transfer shortstop from South Carolina. When he wanted to play for LSU, why? He liked the colors, the team colors. He was playing video game football.
That's right.
And
Yes.
he liked the colors, but his parents were like, "It's too far. That's too far away. You're going to South Carolina." But when he got the call from LSU, he said he was in tears because he said, I wanted to play for such a winning program. And South Carolina, obviously, has not had a bad program itself over the years. Maybe not quite as good as it was when they won those back-to-back World Series back in the early 2010s, but still very good. And for him to say that is like that says something to me.
Koki, from an offensive standpoint, obviously, he was brought to tears, as you had in your story at theadvocate.com, that he frankly didn't think that he was good enough offensively to play at a place like LSU based on on the numbers that he'd put up at South Carolina. Can you just sort of walk us through in a relatively short fashion about how LSU is just sort of try to help him redefine his swing?
Yes, we had a lot of the notes that Rab just mentioned. We had that exclusively in our story at The Advocate. And with Michael Braswell, I think a lot of the concentration with him is just trying to get his lower body, and particularly his hips, more involved into his swing. That generates more power, and that's something that was just flat out missing from his numbers and his production at South Carolina, because as a contact hitter, he wasn't that bad. And he improved a lot from his freshman year to his sophomore year when you look at the SEC numbers in particular. He hit very well at the beginning of his freshman season against non-conference competition, but then against conference competition, hit like 210. Like it wasn't particularly great. And but he hit better his sophomore season, but the power numbers weren't there in either year. And I think just trying to get more extra base hits out of him, and because he has a pretty good approach at the plate, he gets on base a good amount, but for him, I guess the key with what he's been trying to work on with Coach Wanaka is, getting his hips involved, getting his lower body involved in driving through the ball and concentrating on leading with the hips before leading with the hands. Because his entire life he's been used to, and it makes sense as someone who used to play baseball as well, you're thinking about, the contact and getting your hands to the ball and making sure you at least, you're putting it in play, which is obviously the first step in hitting for anyone in general. But with him, the concentration has been more on hips because you've been swinging and hitting baseballs all your life. That's going to come naturally.
Right.
Now it's just a matter of, taking your game to the next level, using your full body and using that full potential, I guess, in your swing. And it's not a strength issue for him when it comes to the power. It's not a hand-eye issue. It's not a plate discipline issue. It's just a matter of, using your full body in your swing.
Body forward, hands back, as the great Southern University baseball coach Roger Cador used to tell me all the time.
Hey, I'm going to brag on this guy for 1 second.
Yeah.
Koki is a new writer. People maybe not as familiar with him, who read The Advocate. No one's going to cover LSU baseball like this guy's going to cover LSU baseball.
Proverbial seam head. It's always good to have a seam head.
Always good.
Covering baseball.
He's Church of Baseball.
Obviously plenty of stuff going on here at LSU as we move down the road. One more thing before we get out of here. I think we would be remiss if we did not bring up quite the story developed before the end of the week last week about Kayshon Boutte, new Iberian native, Westgate High grad. Obviously came here in 2020. He was one of the better recruits in the 2020 class. Rab, I got to say this is as remarkable, and I don't want to say surprising because I think we're going to see this more and more now as we go down the road. But certainly a surprising story. Elements of this story were very surprising. He's arrested. He is alleged to have placed more than 8,900 bets while he was at LSU, most, if not all, underage, while he was underage, to the tune of winding up $80,000 in the hole. Kayshon Boutte, it's interesting. Rab, as you remember, he came to LSU. He had sort of a couple of breakout performances toward the end of the year as a freshman, and looked like the sky was the limit for this guy. Honestly, to be perfectly honest, looked like a guy who probably was going to be on his way to being yet another NFL first-round draft pick. as a wide receiver at LSU. You just want to speak a little bit to his path through LSU and really, for that matter, now that I'm thinking about it, where were you when you found out about when you saw this news when Wilson Alexander got this up on theadvocate.com and just sort of your thoughts in general?
Yeah, it's hard to think of many LSU athletes who had such a meteoric streak across the LSU sky as Kayshon Boutte. I mean, like I said, he comes as a freshman, has this game for the ages.
Cecil Collins would be one of those.
Yeah, Cecil Collins would be one in that category. Yeah, has this game for the ages against Ole Miss, the last game of the 2020 season. With the record-breaking performance, and goes into 2021, and he's the man, and then he gets hurt.
And was having a a season up until he suffered that ankle injury against Kentucky,
and he gets hurt. Trying to make a spectacular play. I mean, giving it his all, but then things just started to go awry. It seemed with him. Brian Kelly very famously said, in spring practice, he said, "Well, I know his last name." It's like, and Brian Kelly say once in a while he gets. He misses on a name sometimes, but obviously Kayshon Boutte is a player he's going to know, and he was trying to communicate something is that, he's not totally with the program, and as he's rehabbing and stuff like that, and it just never became a thing for him again. I'm going to stay. Then he's going to leave, and he finally leaves, and he's playing pro ball, and not nearly as highly. People thought he's going to be a first-round draft pick.
Winds up being a
sixth-round draft pick, and he played with the Patriots this past year, got a couple of catches in a few games, and now you really wonder. A la Cecil Collins, a la Darius Geis or something like that. What is his future in football? Does he have one? And it's just I don't say it's a totally wasted talent at this point, but it has the potential to be.
8,900 bets.
Yeah, I mean, this is
8,900 bets.
And this is talking about a self-inflicted issue, and gambling is a problem. Like a lot of other people have problems in this world, and I understand that, but. It's something that's not taken lightly, and it can't be tolerated on the college level, on the pro level, and so and of course your mind goes to does this impact other players? Was he placing bets for teammates or something like that? I don't think
said it has no evidence.
No, but
supporting that. But you do have to worry, and we'll find this out as we go down the road.
Yeah. I don't think we're ready to close the book on the whole Kayshon Boutte episode, and it's a cautionary tale for sure, because as you said, with the proliferation of sports betting in this country and everything, it's become so mainstream, and it's almost made us think of sports betting as something totally benign, but it isn't always, and this is a case of that.
And we know, I mean, listen, before sports gambling became legal, I'm going to hopefully tell a very, very concise, I'll tell it as concisely as I can, but this was, my God, 16, 17, 18 years ago when Mike Leach was still a coach at Texas Tech, and he went off, as only Mike Leach can do, he went off on this great story about, what do they do to curtail gambling and making sure you don't get yourself in trouble as a college athlete. And he went on this big, long, protracted story about how the NCAA produced this video about how, sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It didn't happen, but this, theoretical, sort of scene that where the star athlete, finds a lovely lady who takes an interest in him and wants to bring her back to her place, and blindfolds him, ties him up, and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, the mob guys come out and take pictures of him in uncompromising positions or whatever, and now they've got him. Well, now you have to throw this game, otherwise these pictures are going out. Mike Leach said, he's like, this, you really ought to see this video. It's great. It was like Goodfellas or something. It was, as only Mike Leach could do. So this has been something that's on the NCAA's radar for a long, long time, and there have been scandals before, obviously, point shaving scandals in college basketball specifically, but in other matters. So it's been something that's been around for a long time. But the proliferation and the availability of, gambling is legal now, sports gambling is legal now, I think, in 38 states. And so it's just so much easier to get yourself an app and get yourself in trouble, frankly. And so
it's so mainstream now. The NFL wouldn't touch gambling a few years ago. Now the Super Bowl is going to be in Las Vegas in
right.
2 weeks.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know that's the classic example right there.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting position to find yourself in if you're LSU. I don't think that LSU is going to end up being the last and only school to have found itself dealing with something like this. But this is it's. I would say this is at the very least it's sort of it's a commentary on just how unfortunate it was, the path that Kayshon Boutte found himself in, where he looked like he was going to be a first-round pick, and then suddenly finds himself in a very, very different position.
There's the injury. There's now all these bets. There was just a lot of drama and things out of and in his control that just, that became very hard for him and really for anyone to sort of handle in a situation like that. But I just do want to mention, though, if you do out the math with the amount of bets that he placed down, that's 22.5 bets per day.
Serious business.
That's a lot.
It's serious business, and ultimately, according to the authorities' documents, what they documented when they made this arrest, that he wound up $80,000 in the hole. Math. So this is not nothing. So anyway, this is going to be something that we will obviously continue to report on and continue to discuss, because it's this was a remarkable story, I would say.
Sobering.
Sobering story, a remarkable story, something none of us frankly saw coming. So that's it was something to behold. We will be here to report on that. We will be here to report on maybe things that are a little bit less controversial. Obviously, women's basketball, men's basketball. We got spring football coming up at LSU. Of course, probably a few more roster spots to fill out between now and the start of spring football as well. Baseball is coming up, softball, gymnastics, everything to stay up to date with all that. Of course, you stay here with us at The Advocate. Where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. Please subscribe to The Advocate. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Please stay up to date with all the LSU headlines. Stay up to date. Get everything sent to your inbox, to your desktop, to your phone at The Advocate with our LSU newsletter at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's where you go to sign up there. We are here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the finer podcasts are found. And of course, we're here live on our YouTube channel, on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers, and on NOLA.com. Please subscribe there and give us a follow. And finally, we are brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies every Monday and Thursday. To learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies and all their services, please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. Gentlemen, never a dull moment. We will be here for all of it as we go down the road. For Koki Riley, for Scott Rabalais, for Robert Young behind the glass, this has been the LSU Sports Insider.